one thing that I see really often, this is usually with people that are deer centric and have a turkey interest, but it certainly happens with turkey centric people that have a deer interest too, is they plant their food plot in the fall and everything's good for the fall and winter deer season, and then they just wipe their hands of it and they don't take care or even notice
Mm-hmm.
some of the problems that can arise if you don't take care of them,
Yeah.
like ryegrass.
Welcome to Wild Turkey Science, a podcast made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow. I'm Dr. Marcus Lashley, Professor of Wildlife Ecology at the University of Florida.
And I'm Dr. Will Gulsby, Professor of Wildlife Ecology and Management at Auburn University. We're both lifelong hunters and devoted scientists who are passionate about hunting, managing, and researching wild turkeys.
In this podcast, we'll explore turkey research, speak to the experts in the field, and address the difficult questions related to wild turkey ecology and management.
Our goal
is to serve as your connection to wild turkey science.
That was sneaky.
Sneaky. Snuck one in on you.
You in a sneaky mood today?
I wouldn't say that.
Well, Marcus, it's almost deer season.
I know.
It is deer season in some places.
Yep, not in my place.
I don't really feel like hunting right now with this weather, but I'm pretty sure it's open. I'm pretty sure bow season is open in Georgia, right?
I don't know. To be honest with you, I've been more excited about dove hunting than I have been deer hunting at this point.
Well, the reason I said that is I took the family up to the North Georgia mountains last weekend for a little weekend getaway.
Yeah.
And the roads were filled with trucks and four-wheelers with tree stands and stuff. I don't know if it has opened or people are just getting ready, because I know it opens the next little bit here.
Well, there's a couple of states. I think Tennessee, didn't they open an early
they have a velvet season. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and South Carolina has a velvet season. I don't know if they call it that, but they have they open in August, or they used to. I know it's been several years since I hunted there.
I know a lot of people are really interested in that. Just I don't know. It doesn't feel like deer season to me yet.
It never really feels like deer season in Florida, though, does it?
Well, and I've been in this cycle for so long. I've been living away from home, and when I go back to my family's land, it's usually around the holidays. So a lion's share of my hunting is concentrated around the holidays.
Yeah.
In most years because of that. And then, of course, we've got some trips and stuff that we plan here and there, but those are usually later in the year also in terms of deer hunting.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've come to appreciate about deer hunting in Alabama is that it's just getting good around the holidays, and I feel like everybody else is kind of played out by then. And it used to make me kind of jealous, like seeing all those posts in September, October, November, which we can still start, obviously, bow hunting in October, but still, like, with getting that rut activity and stuff, it's nice to be able to hunt around the holidays.
Yeah, that first week of January is something special around my family's place. Yeah. Well, given the obvious increase in interest right now with deer, I thought, it'd be a good idea for us to revisit this. I think we did this with Deer University some time ago.
We did this forever ago. I think it was like right after the podcast came out.
Yeah, right around that time. And I think there was a lot of interest from their audience. And I know we share some of the same audience here, so you may have heard us there. But there's a lot of folks that are trying to balance an interest in deer hunting with the interest in turkey hunting and managing their property to do both. And I thought it'd be a good idea for us to talk about some of the overlap and maybe places where there's not as much overlap. Why don't I know where we're going to go if we talk about where there's not overlap, but why don't we start with some areas that we might be recommending a very similar thing
Yeah.
to deer and turkey hunters, and we could just
Yeah.
start there. So do you
You
want
got an
to?
idea, or you want me to kick it off?
Why don't you kick it off? Seems like you're anxious.
Do I? Trying to seem relaxed.
Maybe that's it. You're trying too
Um,
hard.
all right. So overlap. Most deer and turkey properties have in common that they need some forest management. Speaking
Yeah.
broadly, we talked about a number of reasons why that has kind of changed over time. As I think people have become more informed, but it's really common still that I go out and visit with a landowner that's trying to manage for either species, that they need to probably do some timber thinning, and they probably need to do some burning, and they might need to do some understory herbicide work.
Yeah.
Let's say those are high area of overlap.
Well, no, even a couple of our recent episodes. I mean, that's one of the reasons that we've had so much focus on forest management is because at least in the southeastern United States where we work a lot, and I've heard from others that work in other places as well that this is the case in forested landscapes, or at least landscapes that can support forest. Forest management is usually pretty important.
Right.
We've also spent a lot of time talking about basically practical considerations for folks to understand and how to implement this, and also logistical or barrier things, related to markets. And we're trying to spend time on that because it's important. And I agree with you that usually when I step foot on a property, that's one thing that is at the top of mind that we need to address is how the forests are being managed currently for either species.
Yeah, and I feel like turkey managers don't overlook the forest management aspect quite as much as deer managers do. I see more turkey managers, in other words, implementing forest management than I do deer managers. I see fewer deer managers burning than I do turkey managers, for example. My biggest selling point to kind of speak to that is, I mean, because you're going to have deer, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the juxtaposition here is like, especially in 2025, it's easy to list off properties that don't have any turkeys on them, right? And sometimes we manage those really well, and they still may not have any turkeys on them, but they're
We
almost
may not
certainly
get
going
the
to.
response out of managing it well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's uncommon, but it happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
But with deer, that's not really the case, and so I feel like there's a lot more.
They come out of the cracks.
I live in dumpsters, man. I mean. You see videos every other day of them running through a grocery store window,
Yeah.
on Instagram. But my biggest selling point to kind of speak to that, I mean, there's obvious reasons that the deer manager needs to practice forest management if he's also interested in turkeys. But even from a singular deer perspective, we know that the research has been done that a high quality food plot might produce 3 or 4 times the amount of biomass of quality forage on a per acre basis. However, what percentage of most properties are actually food plot as opposed to forest in most of the eastern United States?
I'd say it's low single digit percentage.
Yeah, so all the time that's what I tell deer managers is, look, you've got 90 to 95% of your property that could also be producing forage for you. So even though a food plot can beat it by 3x or 4x, you've got 10x the acres, so you can more than compensate for that.
Yeah. Well, I was having a little mental dialogue on the side right then while you're going through that thinking. I have a sidebar with myself commonly when I'm in conversation.
So what you're saying is you weren't paying attention to what I said.
No, I was paying attention, but it made me think of a few things, and then I kind of contemplated it and really quickly to come to this general conclusion. So we'll see how you take it here.
All right.
One of the things that I think is quite different between the two, at least as managers commonly practice, are that it's way more common for deer managers to focus on food and turkey managers to focus on something else, like nesting structure or predator management, things like that. Food is almost always the first thing. And even when you were talking
And
about
often the
that,
only thing.
yeah, sometimes it's the only thing, or often even, but we get so focused on food with deer. And I had an interesting conversation actually today. I don't know when it will air, but if folks are listening, they'll hear it. Bronson and I had this discussion with relation to deer, how powerful it is to manage something other than food.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly, we were talking about cover.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in a landscape now where most land managers have food plots and feeders, and some of them are doing forest management on top of it. And we have tons of food all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
But we can be real strategic about where we put cover and anchor deer to it. And
Mm-hmm.
we were covering a study and going into that in detail, and I don't think we need to here.
Yeah.
But to me, that it was sort of an empowering discussion because we started talking about how to move strategically to move cover around the landscape to influence where deer hang out
Yeah.
and to make them less safe to us as hunters and
Yeah.
maybe more safe to their neighbor.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important discussion, and it just dawned on me when you started there, like I just had this sort of epiphany moment that the food usually when I see people focused on food for turkeys, it's carrying over from their deer management
Mm-hmm.
perspective, or maybe even cattle management, depending
Mm-hmm.
on who it is. But it's really common for turkey managers to focus on cover first and then
Mm-hmm.
think of other things.
Yeah.
Do you get that same impression?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's still a lot of focus, I think, on turkey foods, but not to the same degree that is true for deer, I think.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
easy to fall into that category. I mean,
Right.
I think about which trees should I plant so that we have good foods.
Right.
What food plot plant do we pick for, you know? But even so, with that, I never think about food plotting for deer for something other than food.
Yeah.
Whereas with turkeys, I quite commonly think of it
Mm-hmm.
as brooding.
Yeah. Reproductive cover of some
Yeah.
sort. Yeah. It's a good point.
So, okay, well, we've started with forest management. Where are some areas that they overlap in terms of what we might recommend?
Well, kind of staying on that forest management topic, I did not used to recommend a lot of 2-year fire return intervals for deer earlier on in my career. The status quo recommendation that most people made was a 3-year fire return. And I have some data that shows that if you're trying to maximize the total year round nutritional carrying capacity on your property, that it might be good to go with a longer fire return interval, like a 3 to 4 year fire return. And the added benefit of that is if you're doing it in a place where you do want to strategically place some cover, like you were just talking about, a 3 to 4 year old burn unit's going to provide that.
Hmm.
Without a doubt, it's going to be very woody and dense. If an area has been, has it been burned 3 to 4 years, turkeys probably aren't going to use it at all. It's so dense.
Yeah. Well, let's say and we've got an area where we want to hold deer with some cover that's 20 acres, and you might split that into two 10-acre units
Hmm.
and have it on a 4-year interval. And then at any given time, you're kind of swapping between
Right.
cover
Right.
because even, in the year of fire, you still have a 3-year rough in the other half.
Right.
So something like that could be really effective to hold deer right there in
Right.
perpetuity.
Right.
And you can be really strategic about
Yeah.
that. And then in some parts of that, you might see turkeys using it, but in some cases, it might be too dense.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So, kind of continuing with that thread, that has changed over time to the point that I now commonly recommend 2-year fire return intervals on properties where deer are the main objective or at least a high ranking one, because we know that those 2-year roughs, I mean, even if it's in the year of the current burn, so it's a 1-year rough. But anyways, areas managed with a 2-year fire return tend to provide higher quality summer forage for deer, right? So you can start, strategically placing a property together so that, okay, well, I'm going to have a food plot right here. And let's say maybe around that food plot, I've got a stand that maybe surrounds it on two sides. I know the deer like to come from there. Maybe I'll consider putting that on a 2-year fire return. It's going to be a little bit more open, provide a little transition area for my deer as they're working out to the food plot from denser cover. But then as I get further from the food plot and maybe transition to another stand, I'm going to put that stand on a 3-year fire return interval, and that's going to be the cover block. And so that's what I'm keying on for my deer. They're going to be coming and going from bedding cover from that area, crossing through that transition zone of the 2-year fire return, picking up really high quality summer forage as they go through there, assuming it's summertime. But if it's deer season, that's the place where I intercept them, is in those more open woods as they transition from the heavy cover to the field, and that's typically going to be in the afternoon. And then in the morning, you're going to try to catch them coming back to that heavy cover through that transition area. And depending on how the property is set up, I've even had some situations where I can set up those areas that provide heavier cover thanks to their longer fire return interval, so that you can have a favorable wind condition to hunt that intercept point in the morning and in the evening. Or if you get a wind that shifts 180 degrees, so you can start to strategically kind of piecing it together that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point. I also was thinking that through. I have also done the same thing where I have tended to decrease the fire return interval length.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to think, why did I do that? And some of it's from working with folks like yourself and seeing more and more data. But some of it has been because of experience and being on a bunch of sites now in the South where 3 years is just too long.
Yeah.
The site is too productive. This growing season and rainfall is too great. And, a 3-year or 4-year for sure interval, I mean, you're getting beyond using fire alone to manage it because of the woody encroachment.
Right.
And
you have to make peace with that if you're going to do it.
Yeah, that problem has been so prevalent that I have kind of adjusted, and in those same cases, the 2-year return interval is still producing pretty high quality cover for deer in that later year, and it's still very good for turkey nesting. So I also have done that, but that's not to say I do the same thing where strategically there are some areas when deer is an objective, particularly if you really want to anchor deer in a specific place so that you know where they're at and can navigate around them, like you were talking about strategically placing it near food plots or stands or something like that, or such that you can access it in given times without spooking deer. That those areas can be really important and really impactful to your overall huntability of the property. Yeah. But you're acknowledging that you might be letting it get a little past what is going to be usable for turkeys, and you might be letting it get past a place that's easy to manage. Yeah. Where you might have to have some intervention other than just fire.
Yeah, so oftentimes I don't like to allocate significant acreage to that practice of longer fire return intervals for that very reason, that you essentially are going to lose it in the deep South if you let it go that long.
Yeah, but a 10 or 20 acre unit somewhere might, in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, depending on the size of the property. But I would say too that an excellent place to look to implement something like that, if it fits your proposed strategy of what you're thinking in terms of that cover to feeding daily pattern, right, is maybe look for areas that already are kind of hardwood dominated, right? So maybe if you have some stands that are nice and just dominated by that herbaceous vegetation and that forb community with a lesser component of native warm season grasses, like we always talk about, let's keep that good, but over here it's like
maintenance You need to
Yeah.
stay in maintenance.
Yeah, but over here I've got this stand that, it's by a road and the wind direction's never right, or it's a little too wet or whatever. Like if that area does not lend itself as well to fire, that's a great area to lengthen the return interval on.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good point. Or, yeah, I guess along those same lines, I've just thought of a couple of instances where there's a parcel where it really be nice to manage it on that same fire regime, but it's just hard to do it because of
Mhm.
the access or because it's on
Mhm.
the neighbor's
Mhm.
line or something like that. So
Can't get a
yeah,
good fire break around it, or
being strategic about that
yeah.
is a definitely a good idea.
But the other thing that I like about having my cover be a little bit more isolated like that is related to something that you said just a second ago, which is that when you know where your deer are, it's easier to avoid bumping them.
Mhm.
And like you could, for example, position those heavy cover patches further from areas that you regularly access, or especially further from areas that you need to use to access your hunting locations, like your
Mhm.
actual stand sites and your blind spots,
Yeah.
so that the cover is well off the road. You're not going to drive right by it and bump deer. You're not going to walk by it on your way to the stand and bump deer, things like that.
Yeah,
I think can also be favorable. But you have to be careful, because I have seen properties where, it's just like mature closed canopy forest where there's relatively little to no cover underneath. You don't see a lot of daytime deer movement. It'll be the same thing if you burn too often. You're not going to see a lot of daytime deer movement and really low vegetation out there.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've seen a couple of properties like that that had a combination of, they had a little bit too high of a pine basal area, and the landowner was burning the majority of the pines every single year. And he had all these great pictures of these phenomenal mature bucks, but they were all at nighttime and they could never harvest any of these deer. And I'm like, man, we got to increase a little bit of cover out here.
yeah,
These deer don't want to walk around just out in the wide open. So we
yeah,
strategically chose some patches to let grow up, and it made a big difference in his daytime deer sightings.
yeah. That's precisely what we were presenting some data on this morning when I was recording with Bronson,
Yeah.
showing a shift in activity patterns of deer to be diurnal during hunting season.
Yeah.
Just a little sneak peek of it, but yeah. So I think being strategic about that from a huntability standpoint, but also making sure like that unit that you might accept is not going to be as usable for turkeys, but is focused on deer. That's good, but part of the strategy is also making sure that it's not interfering with something important for turkeys, like you're
Hmm.
not blocking a roost site
Yeah. That's a
or
good point.
something like that. I think is another thing to take into consideration when you're planning out that process.
Yeah.
And a lot of this stuff is difficult. And often when you own the land, there's a lot of value that comes with the knowledge that comes with that, but you also are often too close to it.
Hmm.
I feel that way sometimes on my own family's
Hmm.
place. Like I'm so close to it, I make recommendations for people all the time, and
Yeah.
then I'm sitting there like, well, what do I need to do here?
Yeah.
You know.
I know.
So
It's the painter's house, right?
sometimes it's difficult to.
The painter's house paradox.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes it's difficult to think through all those things, but definitely important, given that you might want both objectives, and they
Hmm.
sometimes can interfere.
Yeah.
One thing I thought it would be good. Let's shift the discussion a little bit to fields,
Hmm.
because a lot of folks are planting food plots and they really
Yeah.
want deer and turkeys to both utilize those.
Yeah.
And I wanted to go there because there's I would say two really overarching issues
Hmm.
that I see when somebody has a dual interest,
Hmm.
where they're doing okay for deer, but they might be weakening the turkey use
Hmm.
by making a few mistakes. One of those, we have some great mixes that are promoted for deer with phenomenal plants for that
Hmm.
purpose. and I'm thinking in particular a few of our clover species that last longer into the spring or into the early summer, in some cases midsummer. And they tend to get more thick, I guess. And it was just recently I was on a property and we changed their food plot recommendations on some of the plots because they observed when they went to that mix that had those longer lasting clovers that it was just too tall and thick during the hunting season for turkeys.
Yeah.
So they weren't seeing gobblers using the plots.
Right.
And I would attribute it based on looking at it to the structure that was present. And that was with plants from a deer perspective. I mean, it's hard to beat them.
Mm-hmm.
They're super productive, super attractive, and they are providing nutrition well into the spring and summer, which is a great thing from deer. But in that case, with having the dual interest, they were losing the benefits of having that plot be attractive for turkeys during turkey season. But also, it was probably too thick for them to use for brooding.
Yeah.
It definitely was in some cases, but it often is too thick.
Yeah, that was the first thing that came to my mind when you brought up fields. I mean, there were really two things, and one is food plot management for deer. Oftentimes, like we were talking about earlier, focuses on tonnage of production at the sacrifice of that structure for turkeys because it becomes too dense or too tall.
Yeah.
You mentioned tall, but density is an issue too, right?
Yeah, it's too dense for brooding.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I thought of is that it's already rare to even see people try to manage native plants in fields, but it's especially rare for people to do that for deer. And maybe it'd be
They
worthwhile.
start flipping that coin.
Yeah, maybe it'd be worthwhile either now or just in a minute when we get to it to talk about some of the benefits that you can get from fallow field management for deer too.
Yeah, I think we should.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like you have to pay a lot more attention to the structure for turkeys, and maybe lower down that seeding rate. You're sacrificing some tonnage per acre.
You might be changing some species out.
Yeah, but here's another option. Have those fields elsewhere, right? So just like we talked about with targeting the burning, target your field management too.
Well, and that's something what I was going to bring up is, the same discussion we had with that cover and the burning, when we're talking about the bedding blocks, for deer. The same thing is true for those food plots. So when I was talking about that landowner that I was working with, we didn't change all of them.
Yeah.
They have a deer interest and a turkey interest. So we were strategic and we were like, okay, where are you actively encountering gobblers and where are you having fun? Where are they roosting on your property? And we tried to use that to strategically put a different mix in those food plots that were near those areas that would be more suitable for hunting and for turkey hunting and for brooding in those specific places. Another way that you might do that is if you're using, one of these strategies that we've talked about a lot where we're trying to transition a food plot into brooding cover, strategically locating those near places that are good for nesting and connected with different practices that promote brooding cover is another great way to target it. And it's not that you lost all that. You didn't lose the plot from a huntability for deer standpoint or attractiveness for deer standpoint. You're just changing plant species so that you have some more conducive things. And I would say what you are potentially losing is some of the nutritional benefits and during some times of the year that you gain from a different suite of plants in your deer plots.
Absolutely.
But we're recommending those in other places that aren't as important for that given person in the turkey season.
Yeah. The other thing too is even if you have a field that you want to allocate to maximizing deer forage in, take a couple tractor passes around the edge, manage that as fallow, right? Because that's already not going to be very productive from an agronomic perspective anyway. And then feather the edges of your field. And guess what? All of a sudden, you've got a feathered edge, you've got fire in there periodically. That's good nesting cover. If it's the year of the burn, that'll even be brooding cover. It can provide loafing cover around the edge of that field where turkeys are going to love to hang out during the heat of the day. And then you've got the brood. I call it a brood wrap. That's how I refer to it all the time. Around the edge of the field that I'm managing for that native early successional cover that poults can go out into, and then they've got the feathered edge right there to run back in. So it's kind of a nice little juxtaposition that meets a lot of daily and seasonal requirements in one small area.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it, and you're trying to maximize the use of the same space then.
Yeah.
And another value that I've talked with multiple landowners about, I've never called it a brood wrap, but I like that. When you're managing for some of those old field communities, you can use that strategically to also provide a screen for you to get in and out of shooting houses.
Yeah.
And that
I
could be a
think,
very effective way
yeah,
to structure it. And I think it even enhances deer use of the plot.
that's what I was going to say. I feel like they're less hesitant to come out during that last hour of daylight. They come out, I feel like, a little bit earlier when you have that transition cover around the edge of the field,
Yeah.
as opposed to closed canopy, open understory forest, hard edge, open field, right? Like in that scenario, they want to just stay back in the woods a little ways so that they can't be seen from the field until it's really dark and they feel comfortable. Rut, all bets are off, but
Well,
that's their tendency.
I want to come. Well, let's finish that part of it. But I have one more thing that by far in the field management is the thing that I see most. That we don't see the overlap in use between the two species. But one thing I just wanted to make a note: I've hunted in several instances where we have that edge feathering and old field community incorporated with food plot, and I've been amazed at how much of the deer activity when I'm sitting there is actually them pilfering around in that stuff before they come out in the food plot.
Right.
Like they're, it's also, and to me, for some weird reason I don't understand psychologically, I just like that a lot.
Yeah.
I like watching them walk around in the native plant community and eat seed heads off of wing sumac, and picking around and browsing on native plants.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like I just find value in that. But
there's
the other thing I
something to
was going
that.
to say before we get back to the managing the native cover, one thing that I see really often, and this is usually with people that are deer centric and have a turkey interest, but it certainly happens with turkey centric people that have a deer interest too, is they plant their food plot in the fall and everything's good for the fall and winter deer season, and then they just wipe their hands of it and they don't take care or even notice some of the problems that can arise if you don't take care of them, like ryegrass.
Yep. I knew you were going there.
You don't see any of your problem doesn't manifest through the fall and winter hunting season with deer, and then you would love for turkeys to use that plot, but you didn't take care of the ryegrass or something. I mean, we can pick a problem, but that's one we run into a lot.
Right.
They don't take care to deal with that because it's not really interfering with the immediate reason that they planted the plot. And I've seen I don't know how many fields that are essentially not usable because they didn't take care of a problem.
Well, and the other thing too is that ryegrass is just cutting down on the tonnage of your crop that you planted too. Aside from eliminating the turkey use from the field, it's hampering your food plot production.
Yeah. So, that's another area where what you're actually implementing on the ground might not align well, and it could be improved by making some tweaks to the way you're doing it. You don't have to necessarily change what species you're planting. You're just dealing with a weed problem that's a problem for one more, or at least it's more obviously a problem for one than the other.
Right.
So with the native fields, this is something that I know we've talked about it quite a bit, and I'm sure this is kind of where you were going with it. I find particularly when people have an equal or majority deer interest, they tend to be less open to the idea of using any of their open ground for native early succession. Is that
Absolutely.
your
Yeah.
same feeling?
Yeah. That's basically what I was trying to say earlier. You said it a lot more concisely.
Oh, well, that's what I'm good for, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, and I get it. Like we're wanting to maximize the attractiveness and productivity of the open space, and sometimes it's just limited.
Yeah. Right.
And also we caveat with all sorts of things all the time, and this is certainly one that's warranted. Your dependence on fields for turkey or deer productivity is absolutely dependent on what's going on in the rest of the landscape.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you have excellent brooding cover everywhere in the woods, well, it's probably not as important that you produce some in the
Exactly.
openings.
Exactly.
So that's not usually the case that I see, but
Yeah.
it can be, and it has been sometimes.
Yeah. Well, one way that I have found to encourage landowners that have a heavy deer focus to start to implement some native early successional vegetation management is you see a lot of these food plots that either have a portion that's really unproductive, or sometimes it's like the whole damn field is unproductive.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do it there.
Yeah,
you know?
don't
And
you don't fight where it wants to be a tree, like John
yeah,
Grucci
yeah,
says.
like that. Like I had a landowner that I dealt with this summer, and we were out in the field, and he typically plants it in soybeans for the summer. It's like a 10-acre field, big, nutrition food plot. But it has this one section that's probably like an acre and a half to 2 acres where it kind of goes up at a little bit. It's not steep, but it's a little bit more of a slope than the rest of the field. And it's just like highly eroded, just red clay dirt, and it doesn't want to grow anything. And we've taken that out of production now. And I said I saw it this summer. I've revisited it this summer. We started this last summer, and we've taken it out of production. And looking at it this summer, it looks fantastic. It had tons of beneficial native species growing up in it, and I'm really looking forward to seeing when they hunt that field some this fall and winter, if they notice any difference in how the deer access the field. It wouldn't surprise me at all if they start coming through that little patch. But yeah, if you have little food plots that just never seem to work out, they're already covered in weeds, or you have a certain portion of a food plot that typically just never does well, that's a great opportunity
Yeah.
to let
So
that
you're
happen.
actually not even really giving up productive space
That's right.
in that case. So that's
That's right.
a good way to encourage that. And like I was saying a minute ago, my perception on sitting in lots of places and watching deer behave, it sure seems like that's enhancing their use of the plots.
Well, Craig did that little project a few years back that showed that, right?
I'm not sure which one you're talking about.
The one where they allowed the food plots to grow up in some weeds over the
When
summertime, and
they're
they had
actually in it, yeah.
yeah, and they had trail cameras out in the fields, and the
Mhm.
fields where they did the weed control, they
I
didn't
thought
have
you
the
meant
same.
we're having like parts of a field, like the brood wrap
No, no,
around it,
no,
what you're
no.
talking
Like
about,
you know what I'm
actually
talking about
letting
when
it
they
get
let their
weedy
food
in the plot.
plots. Yeah, when
Yeah,
they let their food plots get weedy, they saw higher deer use.
yeah. Well, and that's one thing I wanted to point out about the native communities, and I'm sure you probably had a similar thought. A lot of the benefits of that community to deer are realized outside of the deer season.
Yeah,
So, you know, we're promoting a bunch of native warm season plants, namely forbs, that are 25, 30, 35% crude protein in some cases.
yeah,
We're talking about as good or better than anything you could plant for a deer during the warm season when they're lactating and growing antler. And it's interesting to me that people don't even bat an eye at planting cowpeas or soybeans or something like that to influence summer nutrition for deer, and the fact that some of that benefit or even all of that benefit is not carried over into the deer season.
Yeah.
And nobody thinks about that.
Yeah.
But I have heard this reservation, I guess, come from some people that, well, I don't want to manage for that early succession because I'm losing that ground for the
Mm-hmm.
fall. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like I don't have any, it's not attracting deer to it
Mm-hmm.
when I'm trying to hunt them. So I just find that interesting that you can manage for a native forward dominated community and get the same thing and maybe even more value out of it from some perspectives for the same reason you'd plant that warm season. And neither of them are carrying over, or not always. Some cases, you know, if
Yeah.
you plant soybeans and they were super productive and you've got that seed, that could be attractive. Or I love American joint vetch in the summer because it's really productive, takes really high grazing opportunity pressure, and
Mm-hmm.
then it provides a really high quality early season deer hunting opportunity as well. So there's
Mm-hmm.
some, you know, some ways that you might get something out of it from a hunting perspective, but a lot of times you're not.
Yeah.
Or even if they would have, they go in and till it under and plant it again anyway in the
Mm-hmm.
fall plots.
Right.
When I'm not knocking that, I'm just saying it's interesting that we kind of have this
Yeah.
difference in the way we view those two things. So, you know, and some of the work that we've been involved with over the past years suggests that we might gain a lot out of adding those native plants,
Mm-hmm.
not just because a large portion of the desirable forbs are also really high quality. I mean, from a turkey standpoint, they're also really high quality food for deer and they actively are eating it. The diversity in plants and letting them choose different things helps them meet their nutritional demands better.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, also we can often do that quite cheaply and gain cover value and insect production value and other things that are associated with those species that you wouldn't get out of a food plot.
I'm sold.
Well, I
and,
just think, you know,
and
there,
and just to kind of build off that, anecdotally, there is a reason that deer continue to eat that vegetation even when they have copious amounts of agronomic crops planted. Soybeans, you know, being probably the poster child for being one of the most highly preferred agronomic crops that a deer could possibly eat. And sometimes they'll walk right past that to go eat a native forward because it's got something in it that they want that the soybean does not. You know, they
right.
still eat a ton of the soybeans,
Yeah,
but
it's not
you see
not
my
to say
point.
that that soybean can't be quite valuable, but
Yeah,
there's also something to be said with going and evaluating their diet and it still having 100 species represented.
yeah, absolutely. Even when all that supplemental feed is provided.
Yeah. So I definitely think that's a place that there's probably more alignment than we give credit.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. There was one thing that you mentioned earlier that shook loose a thought for me that I lost and forgot to share. So I wanted to circle back to it. But anytime that I know a field is particularly attractive to turkeys and they like to spend time there in the spring, I'm going to make sure that I have an area in that field for turkeys to strut during spring, just from a huntability standpoint. You know, we talk about increasing abundance and providing these, you know, reproductive cover types all the time, and that's exceptionally important. But the reason we're doing that is to hunt the bird, right? Like, I mean, at the end of the day, that's what's driving and then motivating our land management objectives. So if you have, you know, even if you're managing an area is fallow, you know, you maybe put in a little clover plot in it that they
Mhm.
can use as a little, I call them little, you know, strut zones or strut plots out in that area. So
Yeah.
I never want to. It was your, you know, example of the landowner was planting a blend that was too tall for turkeys to go in during the spring, so they weren't seeing turkeys there anymore.
Mm.
That shook that loose. And there's also the opportunity there in that particular situation that the landowner could even go down and mow some lanes or
Yeah.
mow a portion of it that they know that the turkeys like to go and strut around in. Maybe that's right down next
So
to
they
where the
just go
food plot
mow
joins the
the ryegrass.
hardwoods. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's not what I was recommending, Marcus.
Ah,
But if you want to twist it that way,
I'm just kidding with you. Well, I was thinking about some examples. Something like crimson clover. Structurally, you could get that's really attractive for deer in the fall and is conducive to strutting during the spring.
hmm
So the structural, and then that one can transition into pretty good brooding cover after it senesces.
yeah,
Whereas something that might also be attractive but are less conducive from the turkey standpoint that I see planted all the time is chufa.
hmm
And that might be very attractive during the hunting season. I mean, it is in many
yeah,
cases. If you have good soils and a good stand of it, it can be a
right,
super attractive thing. But not much gained from a deer's perspective on that.
hmm exactly,
So you're trying to balance things where there is a lot of overlap, but the little choices like that can really uh, you start to see some divergence, I guess, in the strategies.
yeah, I would agree with that. I feel like, I mean, kind of, unless you had any other major thoughts or comparisons and things to contrast between managing for the two species, I kind of think to recap all this, I mean, deer and turkey management do pair pretty well together.
Yeah.
They are both generalist species that use, all stages of succession on an annual basis. The difference is that we're managing for a really special vegetation community during a short period of the year for
Mm,
turkeys, and that's particularly brooding cover.
yeah, that's right. Well, and the thing that I thought of when you were saying that they are both, I would consider them both, at least in the southeastern United States, to be umbrella species.
hmm
And that they overlap. You think about this from an ecology standpoint. An umbrella species is one that when you manage for it benefits a whole bunch of other species, and it's sort of like driving the management.
hmm
I certainly think that those species, both deer and turkeys, fit into that, right? And part of their umbrella overlaps with one another, a large
hmm
part of it, I would say.
Yeah, that's right.
But the fact of the matter is, a large portion of the landscape is being managed intensively for one or both of those species, which then has a broad positive effect on a whole bunch of other species that just aren't going to drive land management.
That's right.
That doesn't mean that they're not benefiting from it. And I personally find value in that as well. And I see that with landowners,
hmm
when indigo buntings and Bachman sparrows and you know, field sparrow. I mean, we could just name all these species respond to a lot of the stuff that we're doing. I gain a lot of value from that, and I see landowners gain value from
Yeah,
it
yeah,
once they're aware of it.
yeah. Absolutely. It just increases the enjoyment of the property.
Yeah.
Well,
So
cool.
deer and
Good
turkeys
stuff.
are umbrellas, and their umbrellas overlap.
How
Take home
poetic.
message.
Is that the episode title?
Take home message.
Deer and turkeys are umbrellas. People will be so confused. I don't know if they'll run to listen to it or they'll run away from it.
Yeah. I think we might hook a few people just from curiosity on that.
Well, cool. All right. I
Yeah.
enjoyed that one.
Yeah, that was fun. Hopefully, timely. I mean, people keep on and on and on and on telling us stay on habitat,
I
stay
know.
on stuff we can apply, and I kind of feel like we're just beating a dead horse at this point, but we do have some gems come out of it and
Yeah.
talk about it in different ways each time. So
It's about time to start covering some papers here pretty soon. I miss it. We gotta
yeah,
talk
we got to
about.
do it. We got to
Yeah.
do some deep dives. We do have a couple of deep dives planned. Just FYI, if you're one of those that really likes us to go deep in the weeds
hmm
on a particular topic, we have some planned. But so many people keep asking us to stay on habitat. It's
Yeah.
hard to turn away from it when
Yep.
people seem to really really enjoy that
That's
and
right.
gain value from it. So thanks everybody for listening. And I guess that one was pretty quick, but I felt like that was a pretty good covering of that topic, and it's definitely timely, and we were getting asked about it a lot. So
Yeah, we got right down to it. One announcement. October 2nd, I already mentioned this, but to reiterate, because the link is now live, October 2nd, I'm hosting a landowner workshop. It's going to be a field tour with Craig Harper in the Auburn area, and that link is now live. It's being put on by Turkeys for Tomorrow. So I'm not sure what the exact link is, but if you search Turkeys for Tomorrow,
we'll put it in the show notes.
Okay, yeah, we'll get the link. Cool.
Yeah.
October 2nd.
Cool. All right. Thanks everybody for listening.
Wild Turkey Science is part of the Natural Resources University podcast network and is made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow, a grassroots organization dedicated to the wild turkey. To learn more about TFT, check out turkeysfortomorrow.org.